All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Women's History Month. This is a great month for us at UAHT, and on behalf of the Chancellor's Taskforce on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, we'd like to welcome you to our first ever Courageous Conversations panel discussion. And so we'll focus on gender in academia and the workplace. And so I will turn it over to our illustrious host, Amanda Ritter-Maggio, who will take it away. So Amanda, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Hey, everybody. I'm glad to see such a nice, large group today on St. Patrick's Day. And it's been kind of a crazy morning, but I appreciate everybody being here. So I thought in honor of Women's History Month, that it would be nice to hear from women across the campus and to talk about things that we maybe not often get to talk about. And so we have a really great panel today, and we'll be talking with the panel, but if you're an audience member and you would like to chime in or ask a question, you can definitely do so in the chat box. And when we get done with, or mostly done with our conversation with our panelists, we can entertain questions from you all as well. So I would like for our panelists to, we have 5, to each introduce yourselves and tell us who you are, what your job is here on campus. And in order to try to be a little organized in the virtual environment, we'll go by alphabetical order according to last name. So I'll introduce our first panelist is Miss Laura Clark. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us about your job here on campus?
Sure. I'm Laura Clark. I'm serving as interim chancellor right now. My real job is vice chancellor of academics. All of you probably know that my background is in nursing, and so there you go.
And you're the first female chancellor of this institution, is that correct?
I am.
That's right. Yeah. All right. Next, we have Dr. Ashli Dykes.
I'm Ashli Dykes. I'm an English instructor and concurrent credit coordinator. Just a little bit of background for those of you who don't know me. I earned my PhD in English from LSU, and my focus area was actually in gender studies and pop culture. I wrote about representations of single women on sitcoms, and since then my scholarship has continued in that area on TV and looking at gender, and I've written on everything from the Mindy Project to the Real Housewives.
All right, next we have Akili Moses Israel.
I work over at Hempstead Hall. I'm the Director of Business and Industry Relations, Community Education, and Kids College. So basically, a good portion of the programs and classes that are non-credit come through my office.
All right, next we have Gabrielle Patterson.
So I'm the history instructor here at UAHT, relatively new to higher ed, in the process of working on another master's in community college leadership and thinking about moving into the doctorate for the fall.
All right, and then last but not least, we have Dr. Nicole Woods.
I'm Nicole Woods. I'm the TRIO Upper Bound Director. With TRIO Upper Bound, we provide access to higher education for high school students who come from disadvantaged backgrounds. My educational doctorate is in higher education and organizational change from Benedictine University.
All right, and you all actually kind of got ahead of me. I was going to ask you to tell a little bit about yourself, maybe your research or your backgrounds, and you all did that already. But is there anything that any of you all would like to tell our audience, just something else about yourself that you'd like to share?
I waited for the second part of the question. My background is in mostly in K-12 education. I have a degree in human development and a minor in multicultural studies. And so mostly what I've been doing before coming to higher ed has been working on the nonprofit side, creating career academies and alternative schools for students who need a different setting.
Excellent. Anybody else, any of our other panelists want to share something else about yourself?
I'll add to mine. I also, other than working here, I also work at Southern Arkansas University as an adjunct instructor in the College of Education with the counseling and professional studies, helping to kind of train new professionals in the area of student affairs.
That's great. Anybody else? Any other panelists?
Yeah, so initially when I graduated, my grandpa and dad both coached, so I thought that I was going to move into the coaching aspect and eventually become a principal. But given that I was a young female, that's actually why I got out of that path immediately in my early 20s and decided I eventually wanted to move to higher education.
All right, anybody else? Other panelists? All right, well, the next question is to tie into the topic of Women's History Month. Like Dr. Smith said in the beginning, this discussion is being held as part of our Women's History Month celebration on campus this year. And so I'd like for each of our panelists to share, why do you think it's important to celebrate women's history as a nation, but also as a campus? And we'll start back with Ms. Clark, and then we'll go back down through the panelists in alphabetical order, if you don't mind. So why is it important to celebrate Women's History Month? What do you think?
You know, when we celebrate things, it could be holidays or other events. Celebration is education. Oftentimes those two are connected. So when we do that, I think, especially with women, we're helping other women. We inspire them. Hopefully we can help them learn from maybe obstacles that we've gone through, or maybe those in the past that have gone through many obstacles in their processes. I think it helps women grow, and it certainly helps us teach our younger women how to be maybe impactful and maybe to hopefully be treated fairly.
Yeah, that's a great point. Excellent. Yeah. Dr. Dykes.
Yeah, as Chancellor Clark said, I really think that it's just an opportunity for more education. You know, when I think about my own field in English, you know, even in 2021, so much of the canon, so much of what we teach is white and male. And that's not to say that we shouldn't be teaching some of those things, but it's good to expand our horizons a little bit. So having Women's History Month or any of the other months that are, you know, focused on underrepresented groups gives us that opportunity to really put that focus and shine that light and just really show people that there's more out there.
All right, yeah, thank you. Akili.
I think it's an opportunity to have a view from a different perspective. You change your perspective, you change your mind. So it's an opportunity for us to open eyes and hopefully open doors as well. I mean, it's also a chance for us to celebrate and to remember that it wasn't always easy. I'm not saying that it's easy now, but a lot of people have had to do a lot of hard things to be able to give women today an opportunity to have positions in leadership and be taken seriously.
Yeah, excellent point. Absolutely. And Gabrielle?
Yeah, I think everybody previously has made good points, but women have definitely been left out of that historical narrative. And I think more historians are starting to realize that women did play such an essential role in history. And if anybody doesn't know, you know, my background is Native American history. Native American women were held to very, very high regard amongst different tribes. And it's really more of that Eurocentric viewpoint of women that is prevalent in American society. So I think we really need to begin to understand the role that women did play in that historical narrative.
Yeah, that's a great point. You know, a lot of early cultures around the world were matriarchal, and folks don't really realize that. It wasn't until a, you know, Christian white viewpoint that came with European dominance around the world that really changed. Yeah, absolutely.
No
and
problem.
then, yeah, Dr. Woods.
Yes, for me, I think it's important to embrace and celebrate these milestones that we've had as women. Just thinking about discussions that I've had with my mother and my grandmother, there are things that I can do now that they did not get to do when they were growing up, or even take positions in their fields. I just think it's just amazing to be able to sit here and have these conversations now.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And that actually leads into the next question, which I was thinking about women's history and like you said, how our mothers and grandmothers, great grandmothers didn't get to do things that women today are able to do. And so the next question is, who were your role models when you were growing up? Or on the flip side, or who are your role models today? So this is a question about who are those women in your life as an educator, as a person living in 2021, who were the biggest role models shaping who you became today? And we'll start this time with Dr. Dykes. We'll go back down the list.
All right. I've got to sort of put up the plug in for TV here. A lot of what I studied was looking at the parasocial relationships that we have. And parasocial just basically means that it's not actual relationships, but it's, when you are sitting in your living room watching someone on TV every week, you start to think that you know that person, you understand that person. And really, what motivated me to go into that was thinking about, the women that I saw on TV growing up. I think in particular, someone like Murphy Brown, that was something that was very outside of what I saw around me, but it was one of those sort of situations of if you can see it, you can be it. And so, it was seeing those representations on television, but also just the women around me. My mother and my grandmother would never, ever, even to this day, call themselves feminists, but they instilled in me this idea that you have to be able to take care of yourself. You have to, assume that you're not just going to be able to follow the role of a housewife and have a man take care of you. And so, they did it from that perspective, not again from a feminist perspective, but it was sort of instilling those early feminist ideas into me, in addition to what I was seeing, on TV and reading about in books.
I kind of forget about Murphy Brown, but she was so groundbreaking as a character. I remember it's being so controversial that she was shown as being a pregnant single mom on TV in the early 90s, like just earth shattering. Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Akili.
It's funny that you say Murphy Brown. That was one of mine, sort of growing up, not only because she was a woman, but because in her early years, she was a woman that was older and not married, didn't have any children. And growing up, that was your defining moment. Your job was to grow up and be a mom. It wasn't about your career. But I was also fortunate that I had aunts who were the first in their fields to do things that nobody had done before them. So I got to see firsthand not only the accomplishments, but also the behind the scenes struggle of some folks, and how did they navigate their way through really very men dominated field. They were the only women that were working in their fields. And so not only did I get to see that, but then I also had a family who was really big on service. And so we had to go out in the community, and whatever we learned, we had to go out in the community and share that, so that we weren't the only benefits of whatever it was that we got from those opportunities and experiences.
Can I ask you what fields were you said you were aunts? Mm-hmm. What were they in?
Yeah, my aunt was one of the first architects at Lockheed Martin. So it was, in the defense field, there were none. And my other aunt was, she was a line worker. You did not have women, back when I was a kid, climbing poles. And so those were some things that were very male dominated, very, sort of rough on them, but they got a lot of benefit out of being in those fields, and they made sure that they pulled people up behind them.
That's amazing. Yeah, awesome. Let's see, Gabrielle.
Yeah, so I would definitely say it would be all of my grandparents. So up until 3 to 4 years ago, I still had all 4 of my grandparents. Just recently lost my maternal grandmother to COVID last year. But I would definitely say my grandparents, because my dad's mom, my dad's parents both have their master's plus 30, so they were very adamant about going to college and continuing your education throughout school, and how education does not stop. It's a continuation throughout your life. And then my mom's parents, neither one of them went to college. So I think I was really blessed to see both aspects of what education can do to your life. And then if you don't have an education, kind of what both aspects of that are going to give you. And I think having so much influence from different personalities really molded me to be not only independent, but they were very adamant about, again, I was raised very Catholic. So if any of you don't really know much about the Catholic religion, it's a little structured. So I was very adamant about always being structured, always making decisions that you would want to make in front of them. So I think that played a very big role in creating me and who I am today. Definitely.
Yeah, all right, thank you. And then Nicole?
All right. Growing up, my mom was a big role model for me. She was a single parent, and I would have to go with her sometimes to work. And so at the time, she worked at Hudson. So that was prior to the Tyson days. But her office area was male dominated. And so a lot of times we're at the Christmas parties, or she's taking me out to her job to help with payroll, or work, I'm doing my little kid work while she's working on payroll. But just to sit there and see her working in that male dominated role, office, and she's still maintaining her household, taking care of me and my brothers, that was just an inspiration to me to see that person, growing and doing these things on her own. And then also instilling in me, hey, I want you to do better than what I have. So that for me was a big role model. And then also a lot of my educators growing up. I know probably a lot of you know Cynthia Murphy. She had a big impact on me in elementary school, and even after, even as program director now, I call her and say, Ms. Murphy, I'm having trouble with this. And she'll give me insights on things. So I really appreciate having strong female leadership in my life.
All right, thank you. And then Chancellor Clark?
I would have to say probably my mother, honestly, just because she's such a strong woman. She's 80 now, but in the 60s, when this was probably not thought of, she left her parents. They were the poorest of the poor, lived probably in a little shack. They moved around working for the farm owner. Her senior year, she went to 3 high schools and still graduated probably one, up in the upper part of her class. But after she graduated, she took her and her 16-year-old sister, and they moved to California. Who does this? I mean, and got a job and enrolled her in school. And my mother wasn't a single mother. I mean, she ended up getting married. She had kids, but she was always, she took care of business. I mean, she was a very strong woman. She did whatever she needed to do, and could probably have done anything by herself without anyone. I mean, that's just the way she was. And she kind of instilled that in the people that her nieces and kids and me. And so I guess I'd have to say that she was the one.
What about anybody today? Is there anyone that you're, for a panel, anybody that you look up to today, have like a political figure, celebrity, author, anything, any person today that serves as a role model?
I would say Kamala Harris. She grew up in my neighborhood, came from where I came from. She's about the same age. So I know what her history is and what her trajectory looks like. And for somebody coming from, a poor part, of Oakland, California, to be able to be at one of the highest seats in not just the nation, but in the world, that means a great deal. And I think it should mean a great deal for women in general.
Yeah, sticking with the political side of things, I would have to say Stacey Abrams, going through losing something, this huge disappointment, this thing that you feel like is unfair, and not sort of, going down into that depression, and instead picking yourself up and saying, look, I'm going to fix this problem. I'm going to make things better for other people. Even if I didn't get what I wanted, didn't get what I thought I deserved, I'm going to make sure that other people have those opportunities, and that everyone's voice is heard.
Anybody else in the panel?
I think anytime you see someone that looks like you and has the same background as you, and you see them succeed, and we see that across the nation, as you've seen, we've seen this overseas, we see this all over the world, really, and they succeed in different ways. Maybe they're based on the roles that they take, But you look at Arkansas, even in higher education, how many women are now really moving into roles that used to not be. I mean, I think we're fixing to have a female governor run coming up. So there's a lot of things. And when you see people that look like you, that those are all inspiring. And I think those are the stories that we have to tell. And these individuals who go up those ladders, they have to not forget where they came from, so that we can inspire, you know, I mean, I'm older, but we can inspire our young people or our young girls. Look at what you can do and what you can become, regardless of your background, regardless of anything, because these individuals are like you.
Yes, and Dr. Dykes took my person. I had Stacey Abrams on my list, just based on her leadership. But also another role model for me now is Dr. Donna Allen at FAU. When I was a student there, I always felt like she was watching me or something. But it was because I was watching her and her leadership in her role. And I mean, there's just so many things about her, like characteristics and how she carried herself and how she was a leader in the field of student affairs that really made me want to aspire to be just like that. So she's one of my biggest role models now, like in my career.
Absolutely. I get the, I totally understand what you mean. Like, you feel like you're being watched, but it's because you're watching someone. So, I mean, I could think of people in my life too, the same way. All right. So the next question is, because we are talking about women's history, and of course, women have not had seats at the table in most of recent history, at least anyway. The next question is, can you share a time that you have encountered sexism or biased attitudes about women in school, in the workplace, or just in general in the world as you move through your life, and just kind of share what that experience was and how it impacted you? Oh, and we can start this time with Akili.
I can think of, they're closely related, a couple of times where I was taking on a position of leadership. So my work, you know, had been it had been proven, but as I stepped into another realm, I got the opportunity to see what some of my men colleagues, or they soon to be colleagues, thought of me by accident. So one, I had a 55-member board that I was going to be taking over. 54 white men, one black man. No, there were two. There might have been two. There were two women on the board, and they made an assumption that I did not have the experience to take over that position. There was not a question. No one asked, you know, no one looked at my resume at that point. They just made an assumption because I was a woman and I had stepped in behind another woman that they didn't like, that I would not be able to take on the position. And then there was another time where two gentlemen that I would be colleagues with, they were talking on the phone and they forgot to disconnect me. And it was the same thing. Has she ever managed? Has she ever taken over a company this size? And it was really an opportunity for me to, one, you know, get on my guard, but two, I knew that I had to work really, really hard. But the third thing I think as women, what we don't always do is to share our accomplishments. So people can see what you're doing, but to share that background and say, this is how I got here. This is why I deserve to be here. There wasn't a question after I took on the position, but I will never forget. And I try to tell not just women, but anybody, any students that I'm working with, this is what people may be saying behind your back. You should know this. And these are some of the things that you should be mindful of. And this is how you can use evidence, share the evidence of what you're doing, and also be very transparent about what you're doing so that you may not run into those issues, you know, as you matriculate through your career.
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah, absolutely. Gabrielle.
How much time do we have? No. So immediately after graduating from undergrad, I took a job at a private school in Louisiana, and it was a very small Christian school. So I was 22, fresh out of college, coming in and taking over as head coach. And I've definitely experienced a lot of sexism from students' dads, inappropriate comments from students' dads. I've had that a lot of inappropriate comments from male students. When I moved to Little Rock, I also had a lot of experience with, I was still in graduate school as I was teaching at a school in West Little Rock. I had a lot of backlash from female coworkers who didn't have their master's degree. It's unfortunate. Usually I've experienced it both from male and female colleagues. From the females, it's either you think you're too good because you're wanting to continue on education and not really understanding. In my family, that's just what you do. You just continue to become educated. That's usually what my mom's side does. And then I quit doing that as well. And every time I've left an education position, it was because I was experiencing some type of discrimination from female coworkers or male coworkers. And I almost got out completely. And then I accepted this position because before this position, I thought I was going to move into more doing like historic preservation and try to work for tribes and stuff. And then when I got this position, I thought, let's give it one more go. And so far, higher ed has been, I think I was made for this because I have so much autonomy. So it's maybe here a while. It's a little too good to be true in some situations. So, yeah.
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Let's see, Nicole.
For me, I think, when you have projects or different special activities, a lot of times you're put in those roles for designing or decorating. Just because you're a woman, it's felt like, okay, she's more for that role. Another incident that I feel like I wanted to speak on was on a student perspective was when I was in undergrad. I had an instructor. I was having a hard time in his class. And what it really was, I had a reading issue. And so everything in this legal class had to do with reading. And so when I was trying to do all of my work and I called him, I'm like, I'm having trouble with your class. I cannot understand what's going on. And his first thing to me was, I saw you on homecoming court. I'm like, okay, this homecoming court has to do with me struggling in this class I'm talking to you about. And the bulk of the conversation went back to me being on homecoming court or, things that I was going to wear, or something like that. So it like put me back in that place of, oh, you're a female, this is not kind of like, kind of changing the role. And I kind of thought about it later. I'm like, that was not really appropriate, but at least, I did finish the class. We did figure out something with tutoring and all of that, but that conversation was just too much.
Oh my gosh, that's insanely creepy. But you know what's sad is that probably every single woman that's on this call right now has had those conversations, honestly. I mean, it's horrible. It's a horrible reality. But yeah, you're in a position of coming to someone who's an authority for help, and then all they can do is just objectify you that way. It's horrible. Chancellor Clark, time that you've encountered sexism or biased attitudes about women.
So in my early career, I worked in nursing, so we all know where that goes, right? Nurses were portrayed as, sex symbols in their uniforms, and how many Halloween outfits do we have now that are in some nursing outfit? But even there, most all of my managers were all male. So this is this is in the 80s and 90s, primary female field. 90% of any supervisor that I ever had was a man. Now I think that has changed some now, but one of the recruiting things we would say to our male students coming into nursing, well, we've noticed men tend to go up the ladder faster. So that in and of itself tells you a lot whenever it's a primarily female field. I do see some areas in general, I guess I'll go ahead and say it in the elephant in the room. There's a wage gap for women and men that do equal jobs. One time somebody told me, there's a wage gap, and you understand that, right? And this is someone who's worked around the world, a close friend. And I said, no, I wasn't paying attention. Well, I started paying attention. He was right. There really is one. I mean, I think if you look at the studies, it talks about that too. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I think we have some of the 70s mentality that a woman's income really is a supportive income to the male who is the primary income winner. And so, women are just fortunate to have a job and they're supplemental to their husbands. I think that mentality from the 70s still kind of spills over here into the, the 2010s, 2020s that we started seeing some of that, especially if you're raised during that time. But I do also think that the other reason is that women who are maybe middle age or older, like myself, we've been a little bit blind to unequal to pay, and we haven't really taught ourselves or taught our women coming up how to negotiate that. So I think sometimes the pay is not equal because of our maybe our natural ability to be gentle and kind, and we're to be the person that brings it all together and not to be outspoken, because that's more of a male role. They can get away with that, and we can't really say that. And so we tend not to kind of stand up for ourselves and say, hey, we need to. I think there's an inequality here, and we need to fix that. So I think pay has been something that I have seen and I continue to see. And before I finish, I have another meeting, so I've got to exit this, and I have to say I apologize for that.
Well, I'm just glad that you could be here. And if anybody else needs to leave, like I said, I know it's 1 o'clock and some people have class. So if you need to leave, please, by all means, we're just appreciative that you were here.
Well, and I'm going to listen to the rest of the recording because you guys you're wowing me here. So
thank you so much. I'm glad you shared your experience. And then Dr. Dykes, last panelist for a time that you've encountered sexism or biased attitudes.
Well, I haven't ever, I think partially because of my age, there's no overt barriers that I've encountered in terms of, education or my career, but sexism is just sort of all around us. It's just in the air. And, one thing that sort of came to mind when you asked that was, at one point I was trying to decide if I wanted to be in higher education or if I wanted to teach high school. And I was actually interviewing at a high school, a small high school in Southern Arkansas. And the principal explicitly told me, well, if you're unmarried, if you take this job, you can live in a little trailer on this woman's property. And I said, well, I can find my own place to live. I don't need that sort of help, but I appreciate that they offer. And he said, oh no, if you're unmarried, you're going to need to basically live somewhere where there will be someone to chaperone you, because that will just be expected in the community. And this was 2004, and just sort of shocked that was thought of that I would need a chaperone if I was going to be the unmarried teacher in the community.
I think the trailer on the woman's property is more creepy than anything else. Gabrielle, go ahead.
I'm sorry, what was the question? I was having flashbacks to some things.
I think you already answered. I think the sexist or biased attitudes about women, but is there anything else you wanted to add on?
No, that's pretty much it. I'm unmarried, but again, that has a lot to do with my upbringing. In my family, it's not known to get divorced. You don't get divorced. So very instilled at a young age, marriage is a lifelong commitment. And being 31 and not being married, I think a lot of people, I don't get as many comments as I used to when I was younger, mainly because I probably say to myself more as well than I used to. But I think we really need to normalize that, because when I first started out at that private school, where I'm from, people don't go to college. They get married 18, 19, 20. They usually have multiple kids by the time they're 21, 22. So that was definitely when I experienced it the most, as to why I wasn't married. And then when I was in Little Rock, I had a male coworker gave me a list of guys and said, look at their Facebook. These are all of my single friends. I'm going to find you a man before the end of the year. And it's like, I don't have any problem in that department. I just have standards. So thankfully I haven't experienced that here. But yeah, yeah. And even in this area, it kind of seems like a lot of students are caught off guard when I tell them, I'm not married. And it's like, well, to me, I don't believe in divorce. So that's kind of another reason I want to be sure that's who I want to see the rest of my life before I make that commitment to somebody. But yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I feel like I get the other end though. I don't have any children, and that's baffling to some people, for sure. So the next question, and we'll start, Gabrielle, it's actually your turn to start with this one. So you'll be the next. And I actually kind of want to lead into this of something that Nicole talked about a minute ago. Any kind of unwritten rules or social norms that don't apply to male colleagues that as a woman, you have to abide by or pay attention to. Can you share anything that you can think of?
I feel like as a woman, you always have to kind of feel like you have to be dressed to impress more than male colleagues. I've even had comments made before by male colleagues that I needed to wear more makeup. I've had that at least at 2 schools that I was previously at, that I needed to wear more makeup. Or anytime we had a banquet or anything, because when I coached, I had to like do public speeches and stuff. We need to wear a dress when you're giving, your speech and all of that. But thankfully, I haven't really experienced any of that type of stuff here. I experienced it a lot in Little Rock, and you would think that you wouldn't be in such a larger city. But I actually experienced more stuff like that in Little Rock than I did when I was in rural Louisiana.
That's a good point. I think appearance is, people think it should be more important to women than men. And when you're in a public venue, you're supposed to, like you said, there's a certain level that you're supposed to aspire to as a woman versus what men can get away with too. Yeah. Nicole?
I feel like with women, we want to put on this super power, super cape whenever we're around. And so we have that superwoman kind of aspect put on us, not just by ourselves, but by everyone around. So we're not only taking care of home, and I'll just use me as an example, caregiving, helping my mom with my grandfather. And then, I'm having to take care of myself with medical issues and things like that. And then you come to work and you have work. So you have a full plate. But a lot of times I think when we're at work and someone brings us something, we feel like we're entitled to say, yes, I'll do it. I'll take care of that. We'll fix it. So I think that's one of those unwritten rules that we're just going to take on the world and just take on everything and fix it for everybody.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. Ashli?
Yeah, going off of what Nicole said, just the idea that, we're supposed to volunteer for everything. I think of all the service obligations, whether it's official service obligations like committees or unofficial service obligations like a reception for someone. It's just assumed that as a female, you're supposed to step up and either offer to organize, or if you're not organizing, you're going to be the one to bring cookies or something like that. And I don't see my male colleagues feeling that same sort of expectation and that same level of guilt if they don't volunteer to do those things.
That's a good point. Yeah. Akili? Oh no, Akili, are you there?
I think she's muted.
Oh, thanks. Got kicked off. I think one of the things that hasn't been mentioned yet, so they were all great points, is the level of assertiveness that we can have. Men have the license and the right to be as assertive as they want. That is something that is expected of them. Women are expected to be nice. And if you step out of the nice arena, then there can be issues, because you're always supposed to be a lady. But if you're being assertive, you're stepping outside of your lane. And I think that's one of the things that we have to do with younger women, is to help them find their voice, and teach them that you can advocate for yourself. And advocating for yourself does not mean that you're not a nice person, even if that is your goal. And that doesn't have to be your goal, but you have the right to be able to speak up for yourself and for others if need be. And don't care what other people say about that. If you're doing what is right and just, you should be allowed to do so.
That's a really great point. Absolutely right. I've in my experience as well, that you don't have to always be nice and complicit and volunteer for things. And yes, I'll bring the cookies, and yes, I'll put this together. Yes, I'll, but we feel that pressure. And like Ashli said, the guilt, if you don't act a certain way, if you don't volunteer, this is not going to get done. Nobody else will do it. I have to do it. And yeah, that's a great point.
Amanda, before you move on, can I just add one quick thing to what Akili was saying? Yeah, and as you were saying that, just the idea of the word bossy, and that's a word that I heard a lot growing up. And if you look at studies, that's a word that's applied to little girls, but not to little boys when they're doing the exact same thing. And so I think that either eliminating the word bossy or looking at bossy it's not a bad thing. It's not an insult. That you can stand up for yourself, and that's something that's going to serve you well in all areas of your life, whether it's standing up for yourself in terms of making, what you should or, earning what you should earn, or, not letting yourself be sexually harassed, not putting yourself, not standing by while someone is doing that. So yeah, I think definitely the idea that bossy isn't bad is something that we as women need to take in, and something that we need to work with young women on.
Yeah, great point. Anybody else want to chime in from that one? Any other panelists?
Yeah, I've been called a B more times than I can count, and it's usually to take off what has been discussed, and it's simply because you stand up for yourself, you're automatically labeled the B word, and I think that really needs to stop, because for so long women were expected to just be seen and not heard. And we're starting to live in a time period where women are wanting to be heard. And it's so shocking that you're automatically deemed bossy, or the other word that I've been called many times.
I can identify with that as well. Yes. So I know we have a little bit of time left, and I want to make sure there's a few more questions I have that I want to make sure we get to. One of the questions I want to ask the panelists to respond to, that this year, and this panel, of course, this whole year though, has been about a larger initiative to address issues of equity and inclusion at UAHT. So from your perspective, what can UAHT do to make our campuses more inclusive? And we'll start with Nicole this time.
I believe that providing safe spaces like this for dialogue is very important. And just having a space where people are willing and can be vocal about different things. I've noticed, here recently, I've noticed in myself that I feel more empowered to speak about different things, rather than when I first started here at the institution. There may have been things that I saw that I just kind of pushed to the side. But now that we have more, open and safe spaces that we can talk and have that dialogue, I feel more empowered to speak on it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, very good. Ashli.
Yeah, going off of what Nicole said, having these safe spaces for these courageous conversations, as we're terming them here on campus, and actually having the conversations, not just sort of dancing around the topic or thinking, oh, we're of course we're welcoming. We don't turn anyone away or something like that, but realizing that we've got to take an active role in making this campus more equitable and more inclusive. And also looking at issues of intersectionality with that. We can't just siphon off, okay, February is Black History Month, okay, we've got that part taken care of. March is Women's History Month, okay, we've got that taken care of. Let's look at how all of these different identities intersect, and what are we doing to make sure that this campus is safe and welcoming to everyone.
Oh yeah, thank you for that. Akili.
Yep. I think we need to be self-reflective, and also look at our own data and be transparent about that data. I think we need to ask our students. That's our biggest client. Ask them what they want to see, and ask them what they need to have from us to be able to reach their own goals. We should be asking, like Laura said, how, she's the first chancellor, female chancellor. Why is that? Who's in positions of power? Where are women on the campus? What positions are they in? Is there disproportionality in positions? Is there disproportionality in pay, or in how folks are able to be promoted within the system? So basically, being transparent, collect our data, use our data, and keep asking the questions. Not just ask the question, but seek out the answers.
Thank you. Yeah. Gabrielle.
Yeah, I kind of agree with what everybody has stated. I definitely think that it needs to begin at that faculty level to make the students know that they are accepted and this is a safe place for them to be themselves. Because kind of once you step off this campus, it's a different world here in Hope. And I've had this conversation with people that don't teach in Texarkana. It is night and day compared to Hope in Texarkana. The students at Texarkana are way more progressive. Even my colleagues at Texarkana are way more progressive. And I feel like given that how Hempstead County in general kind of is lagging to a degree with 2021 aspects, this campus does need to be a place for those students in this community to know once they step on here, they are going to be accepted. They're not going to be discriminated against, and that we are going to embrace everybody regardless of their ethnicity, their sexual orientation, whatever it is they're going through. And, despite COVID, I do think eventually we need to have more on-campus activities to make this feel like a college campus, because it does not. And I feel like once we have a little bit more activities for students to kind of go to, that's going to allow them to network with people on campus that are more like them. And that's how you make students successful, when they have that sense of community to know that there are people like them on this campus. That's how we're going to be able to make sure they are successful.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Thank you for sharing that. These last few questions in our last few minutes here, it's going to sound like the Jeopardy potpourri category, but I just want everybody on the panel here just to real quick share something, because I think Akili was the one who said it, and you're right. A lot of times women do not speak out about things that they're proud that they've accomplished. So can each of you share something that you're proud of, something that you've accomplished in your life? And we'll start with Ashli.
Yeah, I think just sort of being where I am today in terms of my education. I'm a first generation college student. And so, going to college and doing undergrad, it was assumed that I would do that, even though I was the first in my family to do that. But then continuing on and persisting with my education, having this goal in mind and accomplishing it is something that I'll always be proud of having done.
Oh, thank you for the sharing that. Yeah, Akili.
I spent the last almost 30 years of my life trying to create better opportunities particularly for poor kids. I wanted to make sure that poor kids didn't grow up to be poor adults. And I was recognizing that Michelle Obama had a commission on opportunity youth and asked me to come to the White House to speak on that to other peers and to policymakers and to students who were opportunity youth, and share my perspective. And I think that was just an awesome experience.
You're officially now the coolest person I know. Oh, that's amazing. All right, Gabrielle.
Yeah, I think I'm proud that I have slightly kind of trying to get away as to what was expected of me to do by my family. And even at 31, I still get a lot of lectures from my family. But for a very long time, I kind of didn't do what I wanted to do and did more of what was expected of me to do. And finally, I've reached the point to where slowly moving in my own direction.
That's awesome. And then Nicole.
For me, I think it would be like Dr. Dykes, completing my education. Throughout the panel discussion, I've talked about me having health issues and reading disabilities. But, just to be able to complete an educational doctorate on top of that, with all the things that have gone on with my family and things in the last few years, and then also writing a grant. That's a big accomplishment on top of all that. So I just feel like those two things are like the major accomplishments that I have had.
All right, thank you for that. I think this will probably be our last question, and I kind of want to combine two things together. So what do you think are the main challenges facing this next generation of young women? A lot of these women we see in our classrooms every day and on campus. What main challenges are facing this next generation of young women? And then what advice would you like to pass along to female students in particular? And we'll start this time with Akili.
I think one of the challenges is having the feeling that you have to do it all. Whatever you're doing, your next accomplishment is just layered on top of all the other things that you have to do. And it's really trying to make sure that we as women keep a balance. One of the best pieces of advice that I got in terms of a career actually came from a man, my uncle. Because I said I was not going to have children, he's like, your husband's going to leave you, so you have to make as much money as a man if you don't want to depend on a man. And that stuck in my head, not so much for the money portion, but to be independent, I had to be dependent on me. And that's one of the things I would encourage young women is to be independent, not for the sake of being alone. So to be independent so that you can do whatever it is that you want to do and not have to depend on someone else to determine your future.
Yeah, that's very well said. Yes, very, very well said. Gabrielle.
Yeah, I think they really need to understand that success doesn't happen overnight. And it does take time and dedication to create the life that you want, and to understand that people have different definitions of what constitutes as success. And it's not always money. Money does not mean happiness. I've witnessed that firsthand. And I think a lot of our female students, especially here at Hope, kind of see the environment around them and just automatically assume that's the path that they're going to move towards. And I think by going to college, they're going to be introduced to different concepts of living. Because like you said, you don't have children. They see me, I'm not married. Prior to COVID, I did a lot of traveling. And, one of the bonus assignments I do is I get bonus points for students to go out to historic parks, to go hiking at state parks, and that's to get them out in the community and go explore, to get away from their phone, to get away from social media. But I think they need to see that representation, that there are different outlets for them, and not just what they're used to in their community.
Good point. Absolutely. Nicole.
I would say I would suggest to women to look at themselves and find out what it is that they want, their personal goals, and schedule that me time to find those personal goals, and just not follow those social norms. I mean, we see it all the time. Women are expected to be teachers, nurses, secretaries, but what about us being in the boardroom? I mean, sometimes we need to have a seat at the table because we are half of the population. So we need to represent that for not only ourselves, but also the future women.
Thank you. Yeah. And then Ashli.
I think my advice would be just to connect with other women. One, the idea of women building each other up, there historically have been lots of spaces for men to meet together and to, pass on, whether it's, a tip about, this job is hiring, I'd love to volunteer you for that, or be, a reference for that, something like that. And to create those spaces as women for each other for those sort of networking opportunities, but also to recognize that you're not alone in some of the more subtle aggressions that our society has against women, whether it's the assumption that, your primary goal should be being a wife and mother, whether it's rape culture, whether it's the idea that, that your appearance is the most important thing, that when we talk about these things, they lose some of their power. And so I think it's just really important for women to have those spaces to do that.
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah. So in these last few minutes, I'd like to turn to the audience. If there's anybody who's on the call today who has a question for a panelist, or a question for us to discuss together, or just a comment about anything that you heard today, feel free to type that in the chat and we'll be happy to take a look at it. I'll keep an eye on that for all of y'all who are panelists. I'll keep an eye on the chat for you. So anybody who's in the audience, questions, comments, thoughts, anything you want to share? We have a really good group today. I'm happy. I'm so excited. While we're waiting, and I guess great discussion, thank you. While we're waiting, is there anything else that anybody on the panel wants to share? Anything we didn't get to today that you want to talk about?
I think one of the things, Nicole touched on this, making sure you have fun. I was talking to my niece, who's my mini me, and she was talking about, how she was trying to move up in her career and, and in all of these trying to accumulate accomplishments, she was missing out on fun. And I'm like, you gotta have fun. Don't be so concerned about getting to all of your accomplishments that you don't make memories along the way, because there needs to be something that you have for yourself. And there's also need to be some stories that you can pass on to younger women as you move along.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I feel sometimes I've felt in the past that as a woman, it's either all or nothing. Like you're really dedicated and motivated and determined, or you can have fun, or you can be kind of silly sometimes. And it's that either or, that, dichotomy of either you're going to be successful or you're going to be frivolous, and having to choose one path or another. And I think that's just so wrong. Yeah, you can be both. And like Gabrielle said, I think it's important for our students to see that you can be a serious, professionally minded person who likes to have fun sometimes, or who, you're this multifaceted person. You're not just a flat one-dimensional character.
Right. Go ahead, Ashli.
Okay. I was just going to say on that subject, though, to the idea of having it all, that, you don't have to work so hard to, if you can't make that space at this moment in your life for having fun. I think back to the early days of the pandemic when, I was home working from home. My husband was working from home. We're also trying to keep a 1-year-old who was newly mobile at the time from everything. And, I kept seeing all these memes online about, make sure that you're making space for self-care. And I'm like, how am I supposed to find time to, go take a bubble bath or something like that when literally every minute of my day is scheduled? And so sometimes some of those things can also just be yet another thing on your to-do list. And so having fun for the sake of fun, not because, well, as a woman, I've got to make sure that I fit the time in for that as well, because that's a box that I've got to be able to check as being a fulfilled woman. So just recognizing sometimes the limitations that are there, whether it's the limitations that society is putting on you or just that moment in your life is putting on you.
What were you going to say, Gabrielle?
No, I think it's important to have that work-life balance. All of my students already know when Friday hits, Ms. Patterson's going to be kayaking, eating crawfish, golfing, and fishing next week. And although I will be there to answer their emails, they know I want to be left alone so I can kayak. And they really need to understand you can have that work-life balance as long as you know how to, properly organize your time to do so.
Yeah, and that's another thing too, that I think as women, we're not expected to say no. That it's always yes, I'll do it. Yes, I will. Yes, I'll be there. Yes, I'll do this. And to say no at some point, I'm going to draw a line, and I'm going to hold to it. It's hard for some people to wrap their minds around that and to accept it. Anybody have any questions? Okay, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say work hard, play hard.
Yeah.
That's the Louisiana motto, anybody from Louisiana. So I still have that a little bit.
For sure. And it's almost spring break. Anybody else, thoughts, questions, comments from the audience? I surely appreciate everybody for being here today. Thank you and thank you so much to the panelists for getting out there and being willing to share your story. We appreciate you so much. And I just really, I'm glad to hear all of these experiences and thoughts and ideas, and from people we might not get to hear from otherwise. Anything else?
Thank you, Amanda, for pulling this together.
It's my pleasure. Dr. Smith, do you have anything before we conclude?
No, it was a wonderful discussion. All of you were outstanding, and thank you so much, Amanda, for leading this great discussion.
Well, it is certainly my pleasure. Anyone who knows me knows I do not need an occasion to talk about women's history or to share experiences. So thanks for giving us the venue and the opportunity to do this. And I hope everybody has a wonderful spring break. Is there anything else we need to do before we wrap up, Dr. Smith?
I have one question for
okay.
Dr. Smith. Who runs the world?
Girls.
Well, y'all have a wonderful break, and thanks for spending your lunch hour with us, and we'll see you soon. Stay safe.